Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, Tracy Hazard here from The Binge Factor, and I've got a podcaster out there. It's a father-son team, but I'm going to only talk to the father today. But it's a father-son team doing a podcast together, and it is a lot of fun. The Cam and Otis Show, and today I've got Otis McGregor on. And it is a really, really fun show. They talk about a lot of topics, and they have this great multi-generational approach to things. Right? They each see things from such different perspectives, and it's adding a lot to the content of the show. It's adding a lot to the view of the topics. But this is a business building show, right? They're lead generating for coaching clients and people that they can help. And in doing so, they're also giving back to the community that they love, the community of veterans and our armed services in some way, shape, or form. And they're giving back in that process too, and finding out ways that they can bring exposure. So that's some of the series that they're working on right now. So you're going to want to check out the Cam and Otis Show. And you're going to want to check out right now, Otis McGregor. He's just amazing. He's Special Forces, U.S. Army, retired. His passion lies in helping people succeed. He uses his passion through his years in Army Special Ops and coaching rugby. See how interesting he's going to be? It drives him to create better leaders, and he believes that better leaders create better organizations create better communities, and better communities create a better world. He's created the Tribe Plus Purpose group and aligns it with how we operate and business purpose. So our operations and our purpose are aligned. They focus on creating lead high-performing teams, and he is a certified business performance coach and certified project director and trainer through the Institute of Project Management. I'm so excited that he's coming on the show, and while we didn't have Cam this time, I'm going to invite them to come back because I'd love to have both of them on at the same time and hear what Cam would have to say, right? Let's hear from Otis McGregor, the Cam and Otis Show. Otis, thanks for joining me. The Cam and Otis Show. I love that we're talking about this. Congratulations on getting over 100 episodes. That's amazing feat. I listened to the 100 episode. It's one of my favorite things to do on everyone when they hit that milestone, because you mentioned shows that you liked and, you kind of reminiscing. And so it gets me to know, where should I go listen to the other episodes? And so it's a common bingeable factor that people do, is like they jump around. If you're a binge listener and you jump around to your 100th episode, how did it feel to you to hit 100?
It was fun in a weird sort of sense. It was like, oh yeah, Camden, this is episode 100. Maybe we should have done something and celebrated.
You didn't celebrate enough because it was just like, hey, we're having fun. It was just ongoing.
That is 100% it. It was kind of one of those. I remember when we hit 50, it was, because we were like, yeah, 50. And I think we even did some reviews and things like that. But when we hit 100, we were just kind of trucking along. It was like, that was 100 back there, wasn't it?
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. What made the two of you decide to start a podcast?
Oh, it's just really, really sad state of affairs. I laugh at it now, but I had two reasons. One, I'm a coach trying to get my word out, trying to share what I know. And two, my son is an entrepreneur, and it really gives me a chance to where we spent at least 1 hour together every week.
I love that. I love that.
That really just kind of was part of it. And I think that was in my mind. It was in the subconscious. But as it continued on, it really became that. I don't want to quit. I don't care.
That's a common thing. And I think, it's a great way to podcast because it keeps you staying connected, right? It keeps you wanting to do it. There's a whole nother level of purpose to it, right? And so it doesn't feel like a burden. My original co-host was my husband, not on this show, but, we have a ton of other shows. And my son-in-law, well, my now son-in-law, but back then he wasn't, but my now son-in-law says, you guys are so funny when you debate and discuss this stuff. You should do it in a video. And I said, well, I don't want to do a video, but podcast sounds like a lot lower tech, a little easier to manage. Let's do that. And so that's what it was for us in the beginning. It was just this like debate and conversation between the two of you. Yeah. And so, you two, Otis and Camden, so that Camden's your son. So it's a Cam and Otis show. The two of you have a really different perspective. And I don't think it's just generational. I think it might have a little bit to do with Cam's entrepreneurial mindset. And I come from recognizing a lot of entrepreneurs. So do you feel that perspective is really adding that sort of special factor to your show?
Well, I do. And really, he just sees things so much differently than I do. And not just in that sense of, he's a 25-year-old and, with everything is going to be beautiful and optimism is, his soul hasn't been crushed by the world yet, right? It's not just that. He has a different perspective on what he sees and how he sees it. That's something that just really adds to our show. And he's very much a closet behavioral economics guy. When he goes down those roads, and you've probably heard it in a couple of the shows where he'll get into that, and it's like, I'm just kind of sitting here twiddling my thumbs, my eyes rolling back in my head sort of stuff, but that's his game. And, he loves that stuff. And so when he gets into that, I think it balances us out a lot.
So did you imagine when you started the show that you'd hit 100 episodes and that you would have binge listeners?
Not at all. I mean, it was literally almost a true whim. It wasn't quite, because I went on to Amazon and said, well, what's a microphone I can get for under $50? And, oh yeah, I got to buy my son one too. So definitely under $50. Said, okay, how do you record this? And we just kind of, what's a free app I can use to edit it? And that was how we started, and just kind of moved along to that. You invest in a little bit more of something like the host tool that we use. And then I needed a little bit better microphone because the microphone I bought didn't work with an Apple. And next thing you know, like I said, it's 100 episodes. And it's like, wow.
It all passed me by. Yeah. So
yeah,
did you have any idea that you had binge listeners? Like, did someone reach out to you and that's the first time you heard somebody had been listened to a bunch of your episodes in a weekend?
I always find it kind of strange when I get the reports. I'm like, who listened to that one? That was like 6 months ago. Why would you listen to that one? Or just little things like that I've always found really intriguing, because I'm not a binge guy.
You're not Netflix binging on the weekends?
Maybe one show one night and then the next episode the next night. That's about as close to binging as I'll ever get, let alone podcast, because I don't know. It's just one of those things. I'm just not that guy.
This is the thing. I listen to a ton of shows and I can see distinctive differences between them. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of a binge listener, because I actually was a binge listener before I became a podcast host and before I started running a podcast company. So all in all in there, I have like multiple perspectives of this sort of binge viewpoint. And what I found over time is that binge listeners become our best clients, our best referrers, that they are the ones who've already sold themselves on us. So from a business perspective, we want more of these listeners. So what can we do to attract more of them? And there's a factor in every show that is actually different. And it's not just the host dynamic. Like I mentioned before, you and Cam have a really interesting dynamic. It's just, we've got the age difference, we've got the perspective difference. Plus, you've got the wonderful voice differences going on, because you both have wonderful voices for podcasting, but they're so different. So that actually helps you guys, because there's a distinction between viewpoint and voice as I'm listening to it as well. So that's working for you. But I think that what the real dynamic between the two of you that is causing the binge factor that is truly the high value of your show is that the blend of those perspectives lead you to choose such different topics and such different guests than so many other shows out there. Like, I didn't see your guests and I didn't hear topics being discussed in the same way that I hear them on all the other shows. And that, I think, is really you're just bringing something, that blend of the two of you is bringing such unique value and perspective that I can see that you're building a tribe. That's the sign that binge listeners are there for you. And I can imagine that this is actually why this 100 episodes just whizzed by you, because it's working.
I mean, really, for me, we have fun. We enjoy the conversation with people, because we have the one thing that Camden and I both have is similar in our personality, him more so than me. He's the guy where you can't get him out of the grocery store because he's talking to everybody. but we like to talk to people and like to hear their story. What's their why? Why did you start that business? Or why are you doing this? And I think the other thing that's really been rewarding for both of us is we're flexible in it.
Yeah, I noticed that. So your most recent episode that I was able to listen to at the time that we record this, we're dealing with a whole bunch of issues of what's going on in Afghanistan, and you chose to depart from your normal format for your episode. You still had a great deep discussion into, your guest and the purpose and all of those things there, but you got to have some more topical issues that, I believe that you personally have some perspective on anyway. So that I think brought just such nice deviation, but in a way where your listeners go, we know, and we expect Cam and Otis to do this.
We've got one thing that we hold true to, but we didn't do it on that show because it just didn't feel right. And that's at the end of the show, we ask everybody, what they learned, to include Camden and I. And in that show with Elton Johnson was our guest. It didn't feel right to ask that. So I think that may be, out of 110 shows, the only show where we didn't hold true on that, because I think that is something that Camden and I are, one of our strengths is that flexibility is, all right, let's just see where we go and let's roll with it. We know we have a vision, but we're flexible enough in it to say, okay, that whole idea is out the window. Let's go this way. And
that's an interesting point that you make. And I think it actually is a sign of really good co-hosts who understand each other. Like, you obviously have, 25 years together. So you have an intimate understanding of each of you. And I'm very sure I'm listening and, you can hear an occasional eye roll. You can tell, it's like, oh, there goes dad, right? It's got to be happening because I know my daughter does it to me. As a parent, you hear that and you're thinking, that is it. With Tom and I, it's that same spouse thing that goes on there. People get that there's that dynamic happening to the two of you. But I think at the end of the day, that co-hosting dynamic, you can be more flexible. You won't throw a monkey wrench in the works because you know how to read each other better. And you two are recording separately. That's what you told me before our interview here. That's harder to do than it is to be co-hosts in the same room with a third guest somewhere else, right? So, because you have to read each other over Zoom or, over however you're recording. Do you find that difficult, or have you been able to just sort of now fall into this pattern of understanding when the other one wants to talk?
Now we have that. We're pretty good at that. Occasionally it happens and, you got to cut that chunk out. Or just as bad when you talk over each other. But I would say that, no, we're pretty much in the flow. Those don't happen that often anymore. It's very much I've got my things and my lines, my subject lines, and he's got, the parallel kind of just a little bit off going down, and we can tag team that pretty well. And I think it keeps our guests more engaged too, in that sense of, there's nothing wrong with the one-on-one back and forth, which is always great too. I think just that flexibility of Camden and I going back and forth, because he'll pick up on things that I don't, and vice versa. And one of the things that we do, the little cheat code here, we're using chat, and it's like, okay, I'm looking at the time going, okay, about, you don't
want to be going tap, tap, tap on each other on video.
Our hashtag is back to the barn, so I always tell our guests, hey, at 30 minutes, we're going to head back to the barn. We may be a long ways away from the barn, and it may take us a while to get back to the barn, but at 30 minutes, I'm going to work our way back to the barn. And usually Camden and I have a little bit of a flow, and it's like, you got anything left sort of thing before we, close the barn door, if you will.
I love that. That's really great. That's great that you have that dynamic. Now, like I mentioned, that one of your binge factors is to have these really great guests. They're so interesting. They've got such interesting stories. Just backgrounds and perspectives I've never heard before that are not that common, because, there's a lot of the typical entrepreneurs who float through all the podcasts, or the typical authors that float through all the podcasts. And you don't seem to be inundated with those. So how are you finding these great guests?
When it first started off, it was like, who's in my first level of our network? And let me just
that's the way for everybody. That's okay.
Yeah, let me see what they're doing. What are you doing on Thursday? Hey, how about want to be on the podcast? That was literally, and probably the first 60 or so episodes were that. Just people that I knew and Camden knows. One of the things that we've started doing just this summer, and we're kind of doing a series this last month or two, is veteran entrepreneurs.
So you've been theming it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this sense, we truly are, because I've got a friend of mine that's helping us out, as a business partner, and brought him in to help us find quality veteran entrepreneur guests, and some folks that may or may that weren't necessarily in my network, but are good fits for us. Like the episode that's going to come out soon is, well, I know time delays and stuff like that, but the CEO and co-founder of Alpha Company. And I got to say co-founder because his missus, it's Alpha Coffee. Oh, I did that like
Coffee. I love that. Okay. Now that makes more sense. Okay.
Yeah, I did that like 4 times in the show. I spent too many years in the Army, and I called it Alpha Company several times. It's Alpha Coffee. Carl Churchill, they're based in Salt Lake City, and they make great coffee. So I give them a plug there to try and make up. But it's finding those veteran entrepreneurs and understanding their story, because I'm fascinated by people's stories. And what was it? What was that catalyst that caused you to go through this pain? I mean, really, you're an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur isn't some glorified thing that you see on some HBO series. It's a lot of freaking work, and it's frustrating, and it's tiring. And
it is. It really is.
For me,
that's what I like. I like that you guys get some of the people who are willing to just go out there and tell you that nitty gritty stuff, and they're really open to it. And, is there something that you do that gets them to be more open as they're sharing? I mean, especially the ones that don't know you or didn't know you before. I
think it's just the way we talk and ask questions, because I kind of alluded to it earlier. Camden and I come to the show usually with like one question loaded up. It's like we're having dinner together or a cup of coffee together from there. It's like I tell the guests, hey, if you got something that you want to talk about and we ain't going there, then raise your hand sort of thing and tell us, we'll bring it back to that. But we're going to go with the flow and what sounds interesting and what's important, because Camden always tells the guests his biggest pet peeve is he doesn't want people to talk about a problem and then not talk about how they're solving it or how they overcame it.
Oh, I think that's really good perspective.
Yeah, we'll get into that a lot too. And it's like, so, what was that? Was it funding? However it may come out, and how I ask the question is, what's that biggest hurdle that you've overcome, or as simple as that? And then in the end, it's about rapport. It's about rapport. And, just like any sort of conversation you have, if you're in the moment, in that conversation, you're going back and forth and talking to the person, and then all the other things that are going on and concerns. And did I say that right? And you forget about those things, because, if we're sitting across the table having a cup of coffee, we don't notice. We just start talking. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love that. That's really great. Now, your listeners, you're obviously trying to build a business out of this. You want to make sure that your coaching program is going. So you've got to engage with your listeners somehow. How are you engaging with them, and how are you increasing your listener base so that you're always driving new leads in?
Yeah, well, one of the things that we've made an effort in the last, kind of going back to the last summer, we've made an effort in the last few months is to be more prudent about our follow-ups, our social media posts. We went through a phase where it was just like, it released, we put
it out there. Let's see what happens.
If you're checking your Spotify, or your Apple thing, it's there. But we've made a lot more effort to let folks know, hey, by the way, this show with this guest was, we talked about that, this or that. And those little things, I think, make a big difference. And, for anybody that's looking for that sort of resource, that's it. And it's free, other than your time, right? I mean, that's what we're doing, is we're spending that little bit extra time and making sure that we let everybody know, hey, we released our latest episode, and here's the person it was about, or that was on it, and here's what we talked about. And yeah.
Return on investment. Let's talk about that. Some people like to call it monetization, and I like to talk alternative monetization, right? Because we're building businesses here, and we might not be doing that ad model. We might be driving new coaching clients. So are you seeing a return on investment? And if so, where are you finding the most value?
I am seeing a return on investment, and it's more in the guests becoming a client.
Guests becoming a client. So that's your strat. That's a valid tactic and strategy. And so that's working for you.
Yeah, it is. And it really gives them an understanding, because Camden is also part of my business, Tribe and Purpose. So not everybody, if you just pick up the phone, if you go to the website and do the whole schedule a meeting thing, you're going to get one little snippet. But you come into the podcast, you're getting a full hour of back and forth. And we're not necessarily going to like dive in and solve problems, but in that rapport building, because you got to be comfortable with folks. I'm just going to guess. I'm making this assumption that you don't have guests on that you don't like. You don't do business with people that you don't like. Well, neither do I. And you know what? I can get a pretty good sense. I do a little 15-minute pre-call. Actually, Camden and I both do. We get a pretty good sense. And we haven't like not had somebody on, but we've also got a sense of, well, this is going to be a long show to kind of draw things out. And then that person may not be a good fit to be a client. It's all about relationship. I mean,
well, in a sense, you're doing that. And I think that, coaching is a tough gig, because at the end of the day, if your client doesn't participate, there's no success that's going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so getting a sense of whether or not they will participate, you're creating some action taking that's required ahead of time before you take them on as a client, right? They have to book with you for the pre-call. They have to book with you to get on your schedule for the guesting. They have to follow up, hopefully share your show, right? So to show that some appreciation. And so you're kind of creating a gauntlet they have to walk. And so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great filter, right? I mean, because we can have our niche in our business and we can say, this is who the ideal avatar is. But I've yet to go through or be part or see any system that was perfect.
Yeah, it's always a refinement, right? As we're always trying to get better clients, to refine the system, get better guests in that whole process. So it sounds like you're on a really great path for that, though, as well. So now tell us a little bit about your coaching business. What is it like and what type of coach are you? And I see a couple of books behind your head. So tell me about your book as well.
Yeah, so I'll just start with the book. That's a book I wrote a couple of years ago, Enable Your Team's Success. And it's a very concise packaging of leadership lessons I learned as a Green Beret in the Army, as a rugby coach, and as a businessman. I put them all, I've used those stories in various areas to help portray those lessons. And then as far as the business goes, what we do is we help people get clarity in their purpose, both for themselves and their business, and then build a tribe around it so they can have more success and fulfillment in life. Because, there's this great African proverb that I'm a huge fan of. If you want this African proverb, and it says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So if you think about that, you want to run down to the mailbox, like Miss Suzanne and I go out to get the mail. Well, if I want to go get the mail, I'm not going to call her up and wait for her to get her shoes on or whatever. I'm just going to go get the mail and get back, right? But if I want to go on with Miss Suzanne, my wife, sorry you didn't know that.
That's okay. I assumed. I love that you call her Miss Suzanne. That's so respectful, and I love it. If you want to have a whole life together, you better be.
That's right. I'm probably going to wait for her to put her shoes on because I know that she'd like to walk out there and get it with me. So, it's just those little things. And all joking aside from the marital relationship, but it works that way in business. There's so many times as the CEO or founder of your company or the leader of your department where you can get that feeling, am I the only one doing anything here? Am I the only one who really thinks this is important? And you feel all alone. Well, that's where the tribe comes in, because if you're part of this tribe, you're part of a bunch of other people, men and women, who have that same attitude, that same drive for success, and you're no longer alone. It's like, hey, how do I handle this? Has anybody ever done this? Hey, I'm thinking about adding this capability into our business, or starting a new line of business, or branching out to this other city. What do y'all think about this? And getting that feedback from, and this is the power of it, is the different perspectives, similar values, but different perspectives, because everybody comes from different walks of life and they're in different businesses. And that's where the power of it, you ain't got to do it on your own, and being part of that group.
So you're helping your clients with this perspective shift, solve problems in the process, the things that they're coming up with, whether they're business and sometimes they're personal, right? Obviously. And, I think you also, at least this is what I really heard from maybe Cam more than you, but definitely from both of you, was that the continual learning is a really important part of your process and what you want to instill in your clients. That it's not an endpoint from A to B and you're done, that this is a long game.
I have a leadership course that I teach also, and we're working on putting that online. But one of the main things I stomp my foot about is not only as a leader, but in your team, is how do you put your team into a state of continuous improvement? As a leader, the only way you can continue to be a good leader is you continue to learn, continue and improve yourself. Because otherwise you stagnate and everybody and everything passes you by. The next thing you know, you're looking up and you're going, wait a second, how did that happen? How come everybody's over there and I'm still standing here? Right.
Well, and I think that's the part of the success of the way your podcast has shifted over the 100 episodes. You know, when I listen to the early ones, it's not that there's like a huge leap shift from 1 to 100, because I check that, because a lot of people do make big, significant shifts. Mm-hmm. You haven't, but I can just tell that you've just improved and refined and gotten into a good place. And I imagine that you just brought the audience along with you because it was a gradual thing.
We did do one thing at the beginning of this year, which we hadn't done before, which was we started, and this was in conjunction with the business, is a theme for each month. We went through and just, and
so you're doing a lot more pre-planning.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, compared to what we used to do.
That's right. I love that. But you know what? We've done some things like that, and it does help sometimes to have that, you know, grouping of topics rather than trying to address it all at one time anyway. So being able to tackle a subject from multiple directions in a theme, that can be really useful, especially when you're handling something with a lot of nuance and complexity.
And you know what? I hadn't thought about it this way until just now. I think it makes the guests feel a little bit more comfortable.
That's a good point.
We tell them, hey, we're not going to hold you to this, but here's the theme that we're working on this month. Some guests are really good and they'll be like, yeah. And that was a miss for me. Like the month of August is misses, right? And the month of September is hunting. Some guests will be locked onto that and they'll be telling a story about something they've done in their business. And they'll bring it right into that theme, which is, you know, there's a
thumbs up for a really good guest, right?
Yeah,
I love it.
Exactly.
That's so great. So, you know, there's got to be some challenges you had. You said at the beginning, it was like, get equipment, figure out what to use. Like those were your challenges back then. And every stage of podcast has different challenges. So now that you're heading into your next 100, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the two of you?
I think it's continuing the flow with, not that the previous guests are not quality, but this string of guests that we've had on lately has just been, it makes it even more.
You want to outdo yourself with better and better guests each time, right?
I know. I mean, here's the funny thing. Our famous person that we've had, is if you're familiar with Business Made Simple, Don Miller. Don Miller's number 2 guy, JJ Peterson. We had him on the show last fall, and it was really just one of those, well, what's the worst that can happen if you ask him? He could say no. Okay. You know, I mean,
he didn't, and he was on your show. So
yeah, he said, hey, that sounds fun. Here's the number to my assistant. Get his schedule.
That's great. Yeah. If you don't ask, you don't know. You're not going to win it then. Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, what advice out there do you have for someone who might want to start a podcast?
Do it into a subject area that not only are you familiar with, but you're passionate about.
Because if you're going to talk over 100 episodes.
Yeah. Because otherwise you end up in that. And this is a little bit of me. I really can't stand repeating myself and that saying the same thing over and over. Now there's times and places for them, right? But to say the same thing over and over and have that same line of questions, for me, it's not my style. Some people, I have a good friend of mine who, now I'm drawing a blank on his podcast. I can think of his name. His name's Chris Hoffman. Chris is very structured in the way he does his stuff. And I love it. And that's beautiful for him. It's who he is. But for me, I blame it on my career in the Army. Unconventional warfare means unconventional.
It's different every time.
Yeah. So what manual? I mean, yeah, of course they're up there, but you know.
I understand. I feel the same way. I never get the same speech twice when I give a keynote, which is very frustrating to my team, but I can't, you know, it means that I have to constantly rewrite it and read and do it and, you know, do a whole bunch of different slides and whatever that is. But I am not good with repetition because I'm different today than I was yesterday. Yeah.
Because you're always improving.
That's right. It is that mindset. So I love that continual improvement. So Otis, who would you love to have on your show?
it's football season.
Yep. So he's got to have some good people in there.
And you know what? I'm a Cowboy fan and I'm an Aggie. So I can think of a couple. Von Miller's just up the road, Denver Broncos. He went to Texas A&M. Von's a great guy. He's, man, just his personality. Emmett Smith. I loved Emmett Smith.
I just saw a big thing about a big business push that Emmett Smith is doing.
Oh, really?
You maybe want to ask him because he's doing some promotion. So that's, that's the thing is when you can tie in someone who you really love to have with something that they're pushing right at that moment, like if they were launching a book or doing something. But I just saw something. I'm not sure what it was because I didn't actually stop to read the article, but I scrolled through and I go, oh, that's Emmett Smith. And I was like, oh, cool. He's doing something because I think he's really interesting. He has broad appeal. So.
Well, and you know what you just reminded me of is Reggie Walker. Reggie Walker just published his book.
You got to hear somewhere. So those are the perfect people to reach out to. So don't let your wish list go because, I always have a small handful of people so that if I meet someone and they ask me, hey, what can I do? Or if I've given somebody, advice, it happens all the time. I'll mentor someone and they'll say, what can I do for you? I'm like, do you know any of these people? That way, like it's a simple ask. And they were like, yeah, actually I do. You'd be surprised how often that happens.
No, that's so true. That's so true. You never know what people's networks. You'd be shocked sometimes, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So your business or your brand, I'm going to call it, is called Tribe and Purpose. Mm-hmm. So what is the meaning of that to you?
I mean, it goes way back in human nature as being part of a tribe, right? We survive through being part of a close-knit organization. And one of the things I always love, and I snicker about this sometimes, about the tribe is, you know what? Like the show Survivor, you can be voted off the tribe, right? Because, family, blood, they're there. No matter what you do, they're still part of your family. Whether you disown them, you do any of that stuff. Yeah. But a tribe is a group of people that get along and are focused on accomplishing the same thing. They all have, like I said earlier, they have similar values that bring them together and hold them together because their values and their actions create the values of that tribe. That's what tribe is about to us. And then purpose is that guiding light for you in your life. The way I define it is you have a purpose in life, then you have a vision, and then you take your vision, you break it down into goals and the goals into objectives and your objectives into your daily tasks. What are you going to do today to add up all those things? Because your vision can be accomplished. I look at your purpose as being fulfilled, and there's a difference. And the difference is I can achieve that vision of having this many members of the tribe and this much growth in the business and that vision, right? That's a vision. A purpose, and my purpose is to create a legacy of leaders who run great organizations, and great organizations create great communities. And because we have great communities around the world, we'll have a better world. I can't accomplish that, but I can sure work towards fulfilling that purpose. To me, that's what's the difference. It's your overarching thing that drives you towards getting up in the morning and accomplishing those goals and achieving that vision.
Well, Otis, thank you so much for being a part of the podcaster tribe in general, and especially our Binge Factor tribe here, because my purpose is to make sure that all podcast hosts get seen, heard, found, and rewarded so that their purpose and their missions and their impact in the world can create more ripples. So thank you for that. And we really appreciate what the Cam and Otis show is putting out there into that podcast tribe.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for the opportunity to share more and be part of your tribe and help you and anybody else that we can, and growing their opportunity to have more success in life.
I had so much fun talking with Otis today. It's interesting because our kids are the same age. Well, our oldest kids are the same age relatively. And so, it's kind of an interesting model to be looking at that and thinking to yourself, like, wow, look at all he's done in his life and look at how different that is. And look at the struggle in between the two perspectives that he has sometimes trying to understand each other. And I get that on occasion as well. But it doesn't mean we don't stop trying. And that's why it's great that their relationship has evolved into this wonderful co-hosting situation. And, the thing about co-hosting is that it's really hard. Co-hosting is a really difficult thing without someone that you know intimately because there's a lot of things to read. And I love the tips that Otis was giving and the way that they've sort of developed a shorthand between the two of them. And, that he admitted that it took them some time to fall into a rhythm for that. But the thing that I want to point out the most that I loved what Otis said was that repetition is not for him, right? Like he hates to do the same thing again and again and again. And that making the show evolve and doing the show, it's different every time because he has a different guest on. He's learning something. He's getting a perspective from his son that he had never heard before. His son asked questions that he hadn't occurred to him. So from that process, it's always an original. So if you have that kind of personality, maybe you should be considering podcasting because it might be just a right fit for you. It turned out to be for Otis the right thing, and it turned out to be for me exactly the right thing as well. And for many other people that I know that are those types of entrepreneurs. Just wanted to point those things out that I heard on the show that I thought were really great. I'm so glad that Otis and Cam are a part of the podcasting community. And I want to hear from you too. I want to know who's out there, who's a part of our community, who's doing some fabulous shows that I've never heard of yet, that haven't come across the Binge Factor desk. So please remember, as if you're a podcaster out there, you are invited to come in and be a part of the Binge Factor. You are invited to come on my show. So you just have to apply at thebingefactor.com and let me know all about your show and make sure if you qualify. I got to make sure you have enough experience podcasting, but the qualifications aren't too hard to meet if you are committed to your show. Looking forward to hearing about your show. Looking forward to hearing how you have utilized some of the ideas that Otis has given you and many, many other guests that we've had here on the Binge Factor. Let us know what you've done, what you've learned from them, and how you've applied it. We'd love to hear from you about that. So thanks everyone for listening. I'm Tracy Hazard, and I will be back next time with another podcaster, another great show, and another Binge Factor.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.